All right, well, here we are. We are here. We made it finally to Awake My Soul. We are so excited for this. This is one of the best songs in the world. It's so good, such a magnificent spiritual high point for this album. And I'm just super excited to be talking about this. We're recording this today on April 1st, which many of you know is April Fool's Day, but this year it's Holy Thursday, which is, recording this during Holy Week, looking forward towards the Easter resurrection, is adding a lot of interesting dimension to this whole theme of resurrection in this song and on this album. And of course, today is also Bridget's birthday, so it won't be her birthday when you watch this video or listen to the podcast, but it is her birthday today as we record it. So I just want to start by wishing a very happy birthday to Bridget from Mumford and Sons on their behalf. Since they don't know when your birthday is, I figured I would do that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes. No problem.
I couldn't imagine recording a better song observation than this song.
Super fun, super exciting. So let's go ahead and jump right into Awake My Soul by Mumford and Sons. So Bridget, why don't you start off by giving us the lyrics? We found the lyric booklet. We lost it last time, but it's back. And now Bridget's going to read the lyrics to us from there.
All right. Awake my soul. How fickle my heart and how woozy my eyes. I struggle to find any truth in your lies. And now my heart stumbles on things I don't know. My weakness I feel I must finally show. Lend me your hand and we'll conquer them all. But lend me your heart and I'll just let you fall. Lend me your eyes, I can change what you see. But your soul you must keep totally free. Awake my soul. Awake my soul. In these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die. Where you invest your love, you invest your life. Awake my soul, awake my soul, for you were made to meet your maker.
Well, that's it. Not a lot of lyrics, but of course, because it's Mumford and Sons, they repeat a lot of these lyrics multiple times. I think the only thing that isn't repeated in the song is that second stanza. But most of it gets repeated at least once. And it's just, if you haven't heard this song, first of all, I don't know why you're listening to this episode if you haven't heard this song, but if you haven't heard it, turn this off right now, go listen to it. It's phenomenal. Listen to it, make it your alarm for the morning, and just go from there. It's if you've never heard this song, this will be the beginning of a wonderful journey for you. But again, I'd be very surprised if you've gotten, if you're listening to this episode and haven't heard this song before. But, stranger things have happened.
Yep.
So as far as literary sources go for this album, the expression Awake My Soul is taken from Psalm 57 of the Bible, the book of Psalms. And I noticed also that a large portion of Psalm 57 is repeated at the beginning of Psalm 108. So I guess I don't really know which one came first and which one was borrowing from the other, but clearly those two Psalms, one of the Psalms borrowed language from the other one. And so I'm listing Psalm 57 as like the official source, but it could have been Psalm 108 instead. Who knows? The point is, this expression is taken from the Psalms, and by looking at those Psalms, we can, it sheds further light on this song and on the rest of the album as well. And then there will also be some references to passages from the Gospels as we move through this song, so stay tuned for that. For now, let's jump into the No Fear Mumford translation, the prose version of Mumford and Sons that I wrote to give you a sense of what's happening in the song on a surface literal level. It goes a little something like this. My corrupt human heart is so changeable, and I don't give attention to things as long as I should. Everything you've told me has been a lie, even though I try so hard to find truth in it. My heart isn't strong enough to handle the great mysteries of life, those things that I couldn't hope to understand. I think it's time I admit that I can't do this on my own. If we work together, we can understand the mysteries. But if we try to love each other, we'll let each other down. We can help each other to see things more clearly, to understand better. But at the end of the day, you are not me, and I am not you. Oh, my soul, I need you now. My heart is not enough. We live on this earth in our bodies, and we will have them until we die. The things we love in this life are the things that define our lives. Oh, my soul, I need you now. My heart is not enough. It's time for you to encounter the one who breathed you into me. I kind of waxed a little more poetic here than I usually do in the No Fear Mumford translation, but I hope it still helps to sort of clear things up. These lyrics aren't terribly mysterious in this song, like they are in some other ones, like Thistle and Weeds or Tim Shell, for instance. They're a little more straightforward, and so there wasn't a whole lot of translating to do, I felt like, in this particular song. I think there are quite a few layers to what Mumford and Sons is saying in this song, so hopefully that translation helped to sort of bring a few of those to the surface. And of course, we'll get to each of those as we go through the line-by-line analysis. So before we jump into that, do you have any comments?
No, I mean, it is, a rather straightforward, simple song, lyrically speaking. So there's not a whole lot to, not much that, is difficult to understand, but at the same time, there's a lot to unpack.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. That's what I was trying to say earlier. So, perfect. Well, let's jump right into the first line in this song. How fickle my heart and how woozy my eyes. So this line could be the poster boy of this album, right? It really captures so many things that this album is exploring and delving into. This idea of fickleness, right? Which is similar to, it's analogous to that giddiness that he was talking about in the song Sigh No More, when he said that man is a giddy thing, which of course he stole from Shakespeare, but the best writers steal. And that plays into also the folly that was mentioned in White Blank Page, that whole theme of not being able to stick with something and of constantly failing, of having all these faults, right? It was not your fault but mine. All that sort of thing really runs through this whole album. So this idea that his heart is fickle, which ultimately he's also saying that our hearts are fickle, right? The heart of every man is fickle. It's giddy, it's foolish, it's faulty. We're all fallen and broken, and none of us stick to things the way that we really should. Which brings us to an interesting point, which is that what I really think this song is saying at the end of the day is that the heart is not enough. Because our hearts are fickle and broken, we need more than just our hearts to come into play. Specifically, we need our souls to awaken. Our soul needs to wake up and start playing a more important part in our lives, because if we just follow our heart, it leads to betrayal, despair, self-flagellation, corruption by the simple sniff of riches blown, that sort of thing. And we end up falling off from the true path and finding ourselves in misery if we simply follow our heart. And so our soul needs to wake up so that we can reach our true potential. And I know we've been talking in previous episodes about how the heart traditionally understood is where like body, mind, and soul all meet together. But maybe that's not the way that Mumford and Sons uses the expression heart. Right? Maybe they're using it more to refer to the flesh. Which of course would tie it in with the song Not With Haste, when he says, do not let my fickle flesh go to waste.
Fickle.
Right, so the fickle heart, fickle flesh, this idea that as physical beings, our physicality is broken, is fallen, that sort of thing. So maybe that's what's going on here, is that he's sort of, throughout the course of this album, we started in Sigh No More saying that there was a cry of my heart to see the beauty of love as it's supposed to be, as it was made to be. But as he's been following his heart throughout the course of the album, he just keeps getting led into misery after misery, betrayal after betrayal. And so maybe he's sort of reached the limit of what the heart is capable of, and is realizing that he needs something more than just his heart. Maybe there's something higher, something deeper. So maybe that's what's going on here. And then talk about how woozy my eyes. And woozy is not a word you encounter a whole lot. And it's one of the great things about Mumford and Sons is that they use these archaic terms. Not quite as much as the Decemberists do, but that's a band that loves to use archaic words all the time, and it's super fun. But Mumford and Sons definitely does so as well. When you hear it, it kind of like makes you stop and think, be like, what the heck is he talking about? How woozy my eyes? And, it just means, I think it basically means the same thing as fickle here, right? Woozy means unsteady or shaky. And so it means that his eyes aren't staying fixed on any one point. They're sort of wandering all over the place. There's a line in Ditmas, which is on Wilder Mind, where he says, now I see your eyes move too fast, right? It's analogous to your heart not being true. If your eyes are sort of jumping every which way, looking at everything but the right thing, it seems, right? And there's all sorts of imagery about that, because sight is such an important expression in poetry in general, and this album is no exception, because with sight is all about, sight and seeing and knowing and understanding and loving, like those terms are all very, very closely tied together in the human experience. And so when somebody in poetry, and especially on this album, when somebody mentions eyes or seeing or sight, it means so much more than just the physical act of looking at something. It usually has a spiritual connotation to it as well, and a connotation of love and that sort of thing. The cry of my heart to see the beauty of love as it was made to be, to really experience that, to understand it, to plumb the depths of that mystery, and to comprehend it. It's very important. So just to look at some of the examples of where seeing and sight and eyes have come up in the album, you've got on Sigh No More, that cry of my heart to see. In the cave, a couple different times he says, you cannibal, you meat eater, you see, but I have seen the same. I can see widows and orphans through my tears. Come out of your cave, walking on your hands, and see the world hanging upside down. That's a really important image about understanding the world as it really is. And Winter Winds, he talks about the warmth in your eyes that set me into your arms. Roll away your stone is another one that uses this image a lot. Together we can see what we will find. Darkness dominates the things I see. Stars, hide your fires, right? Don't let anybody see what's going on. I gave you all, close my eyes for a while, force in the world a patient smile. The blind man sleeps in the doorway. Little lion man, you know that you have seen this all before. Tim Shell, I will tell the night and whisper, lose your sight. Thistle and weeds, it's getting dark, darling, too dark to see. Look over your hills. And then awake my soul, how woozy my eyes. Later on he says, lend me your eyes, I can change what you see. And that'll be a really important concept as well, once we get to that. Dust Bowl Dance, he talks about look in your eye. And then he says, I know what I've done because I know what I've seen. And then After the Storm is really where a lot of these images of seeing come together. You must know life to see decay, but there will come a time you'll see when love will not break your heart. Get over your hill and see what you find there. and I saw exactly what was true, which will tie in again with the theme of truth that's running throughout this album and this song. So as you can see what I did there?
Oh.
Seeing and sight and eyes are all over this album. And it's really, I guess we might even say that's what the primary struggle of this album is to fulfill that desire, that cry of the heart to see the beauty of love. We're trying to see the beauty of love.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so evasive, as so many of these songs illustrate so well. You have any thoughts about eyes and seeing things? Glasses, maybe?
I was thinking more woozy my eyes, unstable, kind of not fixated on one thing, maybe divided in some way, which just kind of made me think of Sigh No More when he says, one foot in the sea and one on shore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just this dichotomy or this inconstancy of some kind. That's, I don't know, just bringing it back to that.
Yeah, because that's such a major theme on this album. And this song, I think, more than any other song so far, harkens back to that first song, to Sigh No More, really strongly.
Yeah.
It's in some ways, in a lot of ways, it's almost the same song.
Yeah.
Lyrically speaking, of course, all sorts of other, dimensions to it. And musically, it's different, Don't believe the people who tell you that every Mumford and Sons song has the exact same music. It's not true. Sure, they can be formulaic sometimes, but so is every band.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's not why we're here. Not what we're here to talk about. Okay, you want to move on to talk about the heart now?
Sure.
So, jumping back to the beginning of the line, how fickle my heart, I just wanted to go through and look at all the different times that they talk about the heart in the songs on this album. So in Sigh No More, talked about how my heart was never pure, right? Like you were just saying, one foot in sea and one on shore. Then they talk about the cry of my heart to see. The Cave talks about how it's empty in the valley of your heart. Winter Winds mentions the heart a lot, right? How the winter winds litter London with lonely hearts. And then my head told my heart, let love grow, but my heart told my head, this time no. That's another really important theme, is that battle between the head and the heart. And I think the soul is going to be key for solving that struggle as well. So we'll revisit that in a minute. Roll away your stone. They talk about how it's not the long walk home that will change this heart. So there's that theme of change again. White blank page. Can you lie next to her, give her your heart as well as your body? And then later, several times, tell me now, where was my fault in loving you with my whole heart? Little lion man, you'll never be what is in your heart. It was not your fault but mine, and it was your heart on the line. And then awake my soul here. In this song, he mentions heart several times, right? In this first line, how fickle my heart and how woozy my eyes. And then in line 3, he says, now my heart stumbles on things that I don't know. We'll talk more about that soon. And then later on, he says, lend me your heart and I'll just let you fall, which is a very interesting line that I'm excited to talk about. Dust Bowl Dance mentions the heart a bunch of times. I have no idea where else my heart could have been. Now I am sure my heart can never be still. So that there's that image like of wooziness, unsteadiness again, right? And changing. Because in that song, his circumstances have been so thrown off, so disrupted that he doesn't know how his heart can ever find peace again, how his heart can ever rest, which is, we'll talk about St. Augustine then next episode. And then he says in the refrain, seal my heart and break my pride. And then later on in the refrain, align my heart, my body, my mind. So it's interesting. I've heard people talk about how Dust Bowl Dance is not very is pretty disconnected from the rest of the album, which in some ways I agree. Musically, it's a much more rock-like in its tone, and the fact that it has this concrete setting in the Dust Bowl is a little bit jarring, although less so once you realize how many other John Steinbeck references there are in the rest of the album. But it kind of takes away from the sort of Renaissance London aesthetic that a lot of the songs have. But I think thematically, when you really look at the lyrics, a lot of it really does. It really brings together a lot of the different themes in the album. So, not to get ahead of ourselves, talk about that more. I feel like this whole episode I've just been teasing other things to come, but don't worry, hang in there. When it's all so interconnected, it's hard to decide exactly when to talk about each thing. And then, so finally, and after the storm, then talks about heart numerous times. I won't rot, not this mind and not this heart, I won't rot. And there will come a time you'll see with no more fears. Love will not break your heart, but dismiss your fears. Get over your hill and see what you find there with grace in your heart. And there's that theme of grace coming back, which is super important. So just to recap then about the heart and the eyes in this song in particular. So each one has several qualities. So there's the heart is fickle, the heart stumbles, and if you lend me your heart, I'll just let you fall. And then in terms of eyes, the eyes are woozy, not seeing things clearly. And then he says, I can change what you see if you lend me your eyes. So there's this sort of a contrast going on here between my heart and my eyes and your heart and your eyes. And so like in terms of who's speaking in this song, I think it's very much an inner dialogue. I think it's more or less one speaker talking to himself most of the time, talking to his vices, talking to his soul, going back and forth between the different parts of him. I really think that's what's going on. But in the second stanza, there might be an exception to that. But we'll look at that when we get there.
I never realized how often they repeat seeing and heart. Wow.
It's a lot. I mean, it's going to be a lot in most poetry, most music. But it's really interesting to look at the way that those images, which again is a reference to sight image, how those images are developed throughout the album. Second line, I struggle to find any truth in your lies. This is really reminiscent of The Cave, where he spends a lot of time in that song talking to his vices and telling them to, make your sirens call, sing all you want, I won't hear you, that sort of thing. How he really wants to he wants to break free of these things holding him back so he can find the truth that will refresh his broken mind. And so in this line here, I struggle to find any truth in your lies. He's been struggling and trying to find that truth to refresh his broken mind in all these lies that the vices and the demons are telling him, but he's not finding it, right? And so he wants to get away from everything that's holding him back so that his soul can wake up, so that it can encounter the Lord, meet its maker, reach fulfillment. He recognizes that he needs to break free of these things. And so truth is closely connected with freedom and also with sight, with seeing things clearly, with knowing things. We talked about Plato's cave in the episode on the cave, where Plato is really using the image of seeing things for what they really are, which is a similar image to what Chesterton does in his St. Francis of Assisi biography, which we also discussed in that episode. So this idea of seeing things, knowing things, seeing the truth, right? that truth which will refresh my broken mind. Or like he says in White Blank Page, lead me to the truth and I will follow you with my whole life. There's that desperation to see that truth, which, is analogous to that cry of my heart to see the beauty of love, right? That's the truth that he's striving for. That's the truth that will refresh his broken mind. The beauty of love as it was made to be. That's what he's trying to find here, to see. Other people and our own feelings always try to get in the way of that. And I gave you all, he says, how can you say that your truth is better than ours? Why are you standing in the way of us reaching, finding that beauty of love? All sorts of things get in the way. In this song, he says, I struggle to find any truth in your lies. And after the storm, he talks about how he used to see exactly what was true. But oh, no more, which is a heartbreaking line. This leads into an interesting, I think it was in the White Blank Page episode where we talked about that idea that St. John Paul II brings up in the Theology of the Body about the language of the body and how we use our bodies to tell the truth or to lie. When it comes to the conjugal act, the marital act, that sort of thing. And so I was just reminded of that again, that notion of truth versus lying in this song, right? So in this line here, but then especially in the later line, in these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die, right? And so since we live and die in these bodies, we have an obligation to use them to express the truth and not falsehood. So there's a really close connection between love and life and truth. And then, as we established earlier, between truth and sight and knowing and seeing. So all these things are tied together. All of these things are different facets of what we're ultimately striving for, which really comes to light in this song as all of those things that we're striving for, that we're trying to understand, to live, to know, to see, that's all contained in the Maker that we were made to meet. So it's all heading towards that. Well then, let's move on to line 3. We're kind of crawling through this, but I think I'm having fun.
Oh yeah, no, that's great.
So line number 3, and now my heart stumbles on things I don't know. So what does that mean? What is this? What are these things that he doesn't know? Why is that? Why is his heart stumbling on them? Why is he bringing this up? Why is this important? Well, as I said earlier, knowing is so closely related to seeing, to truth, to love and life and that sort of thing. So these things he doesn't know, he's encountering mysteries too great for him, which we do every day, even if we don't realize it, right? Just the mystery of our own personhood, the mystery of the other person. Today's Bridget's birthday, the mystery of new life coming into the world, and this entire, other person that is separate from us. These are great mysteries, and we can often fall into the temptation of thinking that we understand them. Whereas at the end of the day, even if we know, scientifically speaking, how all of the different processes work that go into things happening, for one thing, we can never be entirely sure that we really understand those processes, or that there isn't more to the story. But also on a metaphysical level, we don't really know what's behind it, what's causing it, what's ultimately, what the ultimate cause of a thing is. So not to get too Aristotelian here, but knowing is such a profound experience. Really fully understanding something is beyond the limits of our human capabilities. It's really beyond us. Like he says in Delta, what's behind I can clearly see, but that beyond, that's beyond me. And the beyond in that song is basically means like eternity and infinity and just everything in the future and that lies beyond us. It's so mysterious and we can't comprehend it. So I wanted to go through and look at some of the different examples of where they talk about knowing in the album. So first one is in Sigh No More, the first song where he says, "You know me."
Mhm.
Right? My heart was never, sigh no more, no more, one foot in sea, one on shore. My heart was never pure, which, as we were saying earlier, is basically saying how fickle my heart. And then he says, "You know me." On the one hand, it's a reference to when Beatrice says to Benedict, "I know you of old," in Much Ado About Nothing, which means that they've known each other for some time and they, have this understanding of how the other one functions. But also it means, you know who I am, you know what I've been through, you know what I'm like. You know that man is a giddy thing. You know my heart was never pure. You know me. Then in the cave uses the word know a lot. First, when it says, "I know the shame in your defeat," and then it says, "I'll know my name as it's called again," and know my call despite my faults and despite my growing fears. You can understand dependence when you know the Maker's land. Now I need to know how to live my life as it's meant to be. So in that song, we have a really confident usage of the word know. He's setting out on his journey of the album and saying, yes, I will understand these things. I will plumb the depths of these mysteries, and I will conquer, reach the end of my destination as a fully formed person and just, become the master of both worlds, right? And yet we know that that's not quite how it works. That's not going to be his experience of journeying through this album. That's not our experience in life. At least not to quite the extent that he's talking about in that song. Even though those are the things that we're striving for, right? We want to know our name as it's called again. We want to know our call. We want to know the Maker's land. And we want to know how to live our life as it's meant to be. And to an extent, all of that is possible in this life. Mm-hmm. But it's always going to be a struggle. And our heart is always going to stumble on the things that we don't know. We're always going to run into experiences beyond our understanding. I've been reading the book of Job recently, and it's all about the question of why do bad things happen to good people? Why is this man Job, who never sinned, never fell in any sort of way to deserve the punishment that the Lord sends on him, he just wants to understand why he would be put through this. And the ultimate conclusion of that book is that this is one of those things that you don't know. This is, the ways of the Lord are too high, too deep for us to sound, to plumb those depths. We're not going to understand it. Which, on a certain level can sound kind of discouraging. But on the other hand, knowing that the Lord is in control of everything about the world, it's reassuring. But it's we're mourning and weeping in this valley of tears, and so our heart is always going to stumble on these things, these things that we don't know. Like he says in Little Lion Man, tremble for yourself, my man. You know that you have seen this all before, right? This is you know that you've stumbled and that you're going to keep stumbling. Thistle and weeds, I know you have felt much more love than you've shown. So some of these things we do know with certainty, right? But those things are so few and far between. And at the end of the day, what do we really know about those things, right? I know you have felt much more love than you've shown, but do I know what led you from that point to the point where you're at now, right? Dust Bowl dance, you know not what is in store. And then later, I know what I've done because I know what I've seen. And then after the storm, you must know life to see decay. And then later, I guess I'll just go home, or God knows where. Which is kind of a pessimistic way to say it, but there's a point to it too, right? God knows where I'm going.
Yeah.
God knows where I'll be. And then this language of stumbling called to mind a passage from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, where Paul says that we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. And so there's that term folly, which is related to giddiness and fickleness, right? And that term weakness also, which will show up in the very next line of this song. But it's an interesting point because our heart stumbles on these things like the Jews did, right? And it seems foolish to us like it did to the Gentiles. But like Job learns, the foolishness of God is wiser than men. God is so wise that even when he's foolish, so to speak, it's so far beyond what we can imagine.
I'm thinking of just the sense of wanting to know how that can be a source of pride in our lives, but ultimately we have to understand that only God knows everything. Even our own selves, we don't know our whole selves like God does. So
that's a lesson I learned day in and day out.
Yeah, so what makes us think we could have a handle on anything else if we can't even have a full grasp of our own selves?
Right. The self is more distant than the nearest star, right?
Yeah.
I always forget who said that, if it was Chesterton or Lewis or Saint-Exupéry. It was one of those three. Might have been Tolkien, but I don't think so. I think it was one of those other guys. But yeah, it's so hard to know. We're so nothing compared to God. It's really amazing. And ultimately, it's such a wonderful thing. These mysteries are too wonderful for us to understand. It's not that they're terrible or awful, except in the archaic senses of those terms. It's not that, these truths are not depressing, they're just too much. Humankind cannot bear very much reality, as T.S. Eliot says.
Right. And that's why we have this whole life. We're slowly learning more and more, but we'll never be able to have all revealed to us.
But as our soul slowly awakes throughout the course of our life, as we're pursuing holiness, these things are opened up to us very slowly, but surely. But never completely, because they're infinite.
Right. And there's hope there too, that we can never stop learning about any mystery, within the church or within the mystery of the human heart. There's still more to learn.
Right. Every human person is a universe unto himself. That is from Saint-Exupéry. So, line 4 then. My weakness, I feel I must finally show. I mentioned the weakness of God is stronger than men, as St. Paul said, right? This is really such an honest statement, and it shows that he's grown, that he's learned. It's reminiscent of Roll Away Your Stone, when he was admitted that he was afraid of what he would discover inside himself, because he heard that he would find a hole in the fragile substance of his soul, that sort of thing. So he wants to finally show his weakness, admit that he can't do all of this on his own, and admit that his heart is fickle, that his heart stumbles, and that because he's fallen, he can't handle other people's hearts, right? If other people give them his heart, he'll just let them fall. And so there's a lot of imagery of weakness throughout this song. So just to run through those: fickle, woozy, struggle, stumbles, not knowing, right? Things I don't know. Lend me your heart and I'll just let you fall. And then when he says towards the end, in these bodies we will die. So lots of language of weakness in this song, being very honest about that. So that wraps up that first stanza, finally. So just to recap that stanza, it goes, how fickle my heart and how woozy my eyes, I struggle to find any truth in your lies. And now my heart stumbles on things I don't know. My weakness, I feel I must finally show. It's a great stanza. I like it.
Yep.
So moving on to the second stanza, the first line of that, line 5, is, lend me your hand and we'll conquer them all. So this is where he seems to be maybe not just dialoguing with himself, but maybe speaking to another person. Maybe one or more of the people that he's been involved with in the rest of the album, that he's been in dialogue with. This is a line of hope. Lend me your hand, give me your hand, give me your help, and we can conquer this, right? That's very strong language. We can succeed and accomplish this thing together. There's no use of the word lonely or alone in this song, like there is in so many of the other songs in the album. The focus is really on freedom and on how, together we can accomplish things. So it starts off in the stanza, it starts off strong like that. But then the very next line kind of counters against it. But before we get into that, I want to look at this theme of hands that runs through this album. So hands is another term that's used oftentimes in poetry. And what it really tends to mean on this album in particular is togetherness, working together towards something, supporting each other, or the opposite of that, right? I gave you all, he says, you rip it from my hands and you swear it's all gone. That's a very negative term of betrayal and isolation, that sort of thing. In The Cave, he talks about walking on your hands, which isn't really related to this theme so much, so I won't talk much about that. But in Tim's Shell, they talk about how, as brothers, we will stand and we'll hold your hand, right? We will support you in this thing. Thistle and Weeds, take the spade from my hand and fill in the holes you've made, right? I'm standing here offering you assistance to help you fix these problems that you've created so that you can start going after what's really important. And then Dust Bowl Dance is another negative image, right, where he talks about how you took it all from the weak hands of the poor, very similar to I Gave You All, which is King Lear's complaint. And then After the Storm, I took you by the hand and we stood tall. So it's, there's been this tension throughout the album of whether or not man is alone, or if he can have help from other people. I think this song attempts an answer to that question by saying, lend me your hand and we'll conquer them all. And when he says them all, I think he's talking about the weakness, the things that I don't know, the lies, and the fickleness and wooziness of the heart and the eyes. So all of these challenges that have come up so far in this song. We can conquer all of those things together if you give me your hand. But line 6, he says, but lend me your heart and I'll just let you fall. So there's this idea that you do need boundaries, and that you are the one who is responsible for your own heart, not me. Right? Like they said in Tim's Shell, I can't move the mountains for you. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains, but I can't do it for you. We can accomplish things together, but we can't become the same person, right? You're not me, I am not you. We are we are separate people and our hearts are separate. And, so I can help you up to a certain point, but the ultimate choice remains yours.
Mm-hmm.
And then lines 7 and 8 expand on this idea by saying, lend me your eyes, I can change what you see, but your soul you must keep totally free. There's eyes again, right? And here they're talking about changing what you see. And as we know, it's so important to see things clearly, to see things as they really are. The cave, he keeps talking about how he's going to change his ways, right? And in that song, we see that the key to changing your ways is to change what you see by walking upside down. And in Roll Away Your Stone, he's talking about changing this heart by accepting grace. There's this idea that we can help each other to see things differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
That if we, if Bridget gives me her eyes, I can change her eyes, point them towards what's important, or maybe turn them upside down, right? So that she can see things more clearly. So we can help each other there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, your soul you must keep totally free. You're the one who needs to decide if you're going to act on what you see.
Yes.
And so there almost seems to be an equivocation of heart and soul in this stanza here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, lend me your hand and we'll conquer them all, but lend me your heart and I'll just let you fall. And then, lend me your eyes, I can change what you see, but your soul you must keep totally free. So don't lend me your heart, keep your soul free. So they almost seem to be equivocating, the heart and the soul here.
Yeah.
But maybe they're just saying that they're very, very closely related, which I don't think anybody's going to deny that the heart and the soul are very, very close to each other. So this is interesting because here in line 9, where he says, but your soul or line 8, your soul you must keep totally free, we have the first usage of the word soul in this song, which obviously the notion of the soul is very important for this song since it's called Awake My Soul. So I just wanted to look at the previous songs and see where this imagery has come up before. So the imagery of soul or substance. So substance means soul in Latin, more or less. And so first got introduced in Roll Away Your Stone. We talked about finding a hole within the fragile substance of my soul. And then later he talked about this newly impassioned soul. And then at the end of the song, talked about this soul that is so rightfully mine. Which that's a really, that particular part in Roll Away Your Stone is very closely related to this line here. Right? In this song, he says, your soul you must keep totally free. And in Roll Away Your Stone, he said, you had neither reason nor rhyme with which to take this soul that is so rightfully mine. Which is also closely related to Tim Shell, where they talked about how death will steal your innocence, but it will not steal your substance. It will not steal your soul. So because death and sin, the devil can't take away your soul from you, you need to keep your soul totally free, right? You don't want to let other things influence your soul because your soul allows you to make that choice between good and evil, and nobody else can make that choice for you, right? Its desire is for you, but you must master it. You can master it. You can make that choice between good and evil. And that choice is for freedom, right? Freedom, not freedom from sin so much, or not freedom from obligation, but it's more freedom from sin, as opposed, it's not so much freedom from obligation, right? Not, and what it really is it's freedom to choose the good, the ability to choose between good and evil. so it'll, like they say in Sign No More, that love will set you free to be like the man you're made to be. And in the cave, he talked about how I need freedom now. So you need to keep your soul free so that you can make that choice, like they talk about in Tim Shell, make that choice between good and evil. And kind of trailed off at the end there. But hopefully, is it making sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've made it through the first two stanzas. What are your...
Yeah, just the concept of freedom. I just find it to be an important concept.
Okay.
Yes, and the importance of keeping your soul free. Yeah, how that's just a conscious decision. That's what freedom is. It's a conscious decision, but it has to be an informed decision. Yeah, I was thinking about it yesterday too. The idea of freedom, and that it's just that definition we keep returning to, or at least the definition I keep returning to. Not doing whatever you want, but doing what is good.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what is good first, and then choosing that.
There's knowing again, right?
Yeah, knowing.
Understanding, seeing.
Yes. So.
Oh, and it just occurred to me that the image of awakening, the soul awakening, when you wake up, what's the first thing that you do?
Open your eyes.
You open your eyes. And that's opening your eyes allows you to see.
Yes.
So really, I guess this image of the soul awakening is that the soul is coming to knowledge and understanding, right? Seeing things more clear for what they really are.
Yeah. And I also can't help but think about these ideas that are floating around right now in various circles, like the difference between being woke and being awake.
Mm-hmm.
In sort of a socio-political sort of ideology there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What are they saying? So obviously woke means to be, aware of what's, socially appropriate to do and to say and believe. So what are they saying then that awake means as opposed to that?
Awake versus being woke. So they're saying awake is more like being more conscious, being more critical.
Not just accepting everything that's fed to you.
Yeah. Even what people might think, if they're well informed, really they're just being fed something, and they're just blindly listening, blindly following it, following along with what's popular, what's culturally accepted in mainstream media, or
so it's using critical thinking and common sense to decide what's really true as opposed to what's just generally accepted. Right. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so...
That is an interesting distinction. I like that. I think the Buddha would approve.
Yes, and Mumford. Mumford and Sons. So it's awake my soul, not woke my soul.
Not woke my soul. Oh man, we should rewrite a like a PC version of the song called Woke My Soul.
Yeah.
That's just kind of depressing though to think about. I don't really want to go down that path. Anyway, let's go back to Mumford and Sons, to the real song that they wrote. And we've reached line 9 where he says, "Awake my soul, awake my soul." Like we've already said, it means that the soul is coming to awareness, that it's starting to see things more clearly, that it's opened its eyes. Metaphorically speaking, we all know souls don't actually have eyes, regardless of what Pixar tells us. And like I mentioned at the beginning, this line is taken from Psalms 57 and 108, which a lot of the wording in those songs is identical. So I'm just going to look at Psalm 57. I should probably go ahead and read that psalm in its entirety because it has a lot of really interesting connections to this song by Mumford and Sons. So Psalm 57. Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me. For in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by. I cry to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He will put to shame those who trample upon me. God will send forth his mercy and his faithfulness. I lie in the midst of lions that greedily devour the sons of men. Their teeth are spears and arrows, their tongues sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. They set a net for my steps. My soul was bowed down. They dug a pit in my way, but they have fallen into it themselves. My heart is steadfast, O God. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make melody. Awake, my soul. Awake, O harp and lyre. I will awake the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. For your mercy is great to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. So we see here that the language, awake my soul, it doesn't just mean that the soul is, seeing and understanding, but also it means the soul is singing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Awake my soul, awake, O harp and lyre, I will awake the dawn. Which is just, the soul is coming out of darkness into the morning light and singing the praises of God as loud as it can. And there's a couple other interesting connections with this album in here. So the psalm begins in darkness with a plea for help, right? The psalmist is in a very dark place and he needs the Lord's assistance. And he says, in the shadow of your wings, I will take refuge till the storms of destruction pass by, which obviously the shadow of your wings, it's an expression most of us are familiar with. It's pretty, one of the more well-known expressions from the Psalms. But those storms of destruction that they're talking about made me think of the storm in King Lear, which I gave you all, talks about, and then also the storm in Thistle and Weeds. And then he says, I lie in the midst of lions that greedily devour the sons of men. So lions obviously made me think of Little Lion Man. And he says about the lions, their teeth are spears and arrows, their tongues sharp swords. And kind of the main theme of Little Lion Man is like this verbal flagellation, right? These accusations that are being hurled against him like spears and arrows, right? Like sharp swords that are lashing against him. And then the psalm moves from a plea to help, from a plea for help to trust in God's help, and then ultimately to praise in thanksgiving for his help. That's when he says, awake my soul, awake, O harp and lyre, I will awake the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. So it's really just a wonderful testament to the Lord's salvific power, which I think sheds some interesting light on this song and on this album, in that, when the soul awakes, it's because of grace, because of what the Lord has done for it, and because the soul was made to meet its maker, right? And then Psalm 108 repeats the last 5 verses of Psalm 57, practically word for word. So, like I said, I won't bother reading through that, but I think it's pretty interesting, this image of the soul awaking and praising the Lord.
Yeah.
It's just, there's been so much darkness and tribulation and stumbling and struggling and lying in this album, that to reach this point of peace, of praise, is such a powerful effect on me every time I listen through the album. When the song comes on, you're just ready for it, and it's such a welcome experience.
Yeah, there's another song where he talks about the cry of my heart.
Say no more.
Yeah, thank you. This to me sounds like a cry of the heart too, in a sense, calling out to God, just awake my soul, which is nice to hear. This more higher level prayer from Scripture. We know that Marcus Mumford, whoever wrote the song, is very well versed in a variety of poems and literature and Scripture, and this really, there's no doubting where this comes from. Yeah, it's just very beautiful that he's calling out, using these words, these specific words.
And interesting how just by using these 3 words from that psalm, all of the connotations from the rest of the psalm get invited into this song.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like how on the cross, when Christ cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That was the first line of Psalm 22. And then if you go and read Psalm 22, so much of it is applicable to what Christ experienced in his passion and death.
Mm-hmm.
But all he had to do was quote that first line from the cross. And all Mumford has to do in this song is say, "Awake my soul." And then you go and read Psalm 57, and it's just, it adds so much depth to this song. As if the song didn't have enough depth already, right?
Yeah.
It's taken us more than an hour to get this far. So,
is this a penitential psalm? Isn't 57 one of the penitential?
I don't remember what the penitential psalms are.
Okay.
Which ones are the penitential psalms?
Okay. I was just curious.
But it might be.
It sounds like it kind of is, but maybe it's not.
It sounds, I don't know, he's talking less about like how he's done something wrong and needs to repent.
Have mercy on me, God.
Oh, but he does start with that, yeah.
I'm pretty sure this might be, but anyway, maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it made me think of those and how fitting that it is that we are going through this psalm, if it's a penitential psalm, during Holy Week. And how you're, referencing this idea of Jesus being on the cross.
Yes, we always try to make sure that these episodes are liturgically fitting. And this is the first time we've been successful with that.
Yeah.
So, hooray. I'm hoping to release this episode during Easter week. I don't think I'll get to it before Easter, but during next week, I hope to edit it and release it.
Yeah, this is a great one to have during Easter, where Christ gives us life, by his death, in a sense.
Yep. All right, so then after that, the first stanza repeats. So just the first stanza again is one, want to read it?
How fickle my heart and how woozy my eyes. I struggle to find any truth in your lies. And now my heart stumbles on things I don't know. My weakness I feel I must finally show. So
it just goes back to reiterate those themes from that stanza before going into the, I guess you could call it the bridge. And I think it's interesting. I hadn't thought of this until just now, but when he says my weakness, I feel I must finally show, perhaps what he means by that weakness is the fact that his soul is not awake and that it needs to wake up. And maybe that's one of the reasons that he repeats that stanza, to really emphasize that line. Who knows? So then we get into, I guess you could call it the bridge, these 2 lines where he says, in these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die. Where you invest your love, you invest your life. Big, important words here in this song, in these lines. Words like bodies, live, die, love, and then life, which is the same as live. Yeah. Just a different declension of it, or conjugate. Different part of speech. Live is a verb, life is a noun. Yeah. This has been Grammar School with T.S. Russell. Okay, line 10 is, in these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die. The soul is obviously not the body, right? It's the classical distinction between body and soul. man is both, right? But without his soul, man's body is not really alive, right? It's not complete. And I think that's one of the things that this song really emphasizes, is that if our soul is asleep and we're just focusing on the heart and the body, we're really missing something and we're falling short. And so in these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die, which is really reminiscent of the line from Winter Winds where he says, the flesh that lived and loved will be eaten by plague. And then White Blank Page where he says, can you lie next to her and give her your heart as well as your body? Which that actually points out that the heart and the body are not identical. That the heart is something more profound than just the body, even if it's not the soul. So I think we're establishing like a hierarchy here, right? The body is at the bottom, and then the heart, and then the soul. So we have the body, which is corrupt and fickle and has one foot in sea and one on shore. But then we have the heart that is also, the heart was never pure, the heart is fickle, etc. So we need the soul to allow us to see the beauty of love as it was made to be, which again is what they talk about in Thistle and Weeds, where he says, I begged you to hear me, there's more than flesh and bones, referring into that hierarchy of the person, that there's something higher than just mere flesh and bones. And then Dust Bowl Dance talks about align my heart, my body, and my mind, which, like I said, I don't want to talk too much about that now but that's where a lot of the, obviously heart and body and mind have been really important themes in the album, and the fact that they're being aligned in Dust Bowl Dance is really interesting. So that's all the references to body and flesh in the album. But then they also talk about death several times, right? Tim Shell talked about how death is at your doorstep and it wants to steal your innocence. Here in Awake My Soul talks about in these bodies we will die. In Winter Winds, they said the flesh that lived and loved will be eaten by plague, which means, killed, dead. And then After the Storm talks about how I will die alone and be left there. And then a little later it says that death is just so full and man so small. So that's a really important theme that we'll talk about in that episode when we get there. Life and living is mentioned numerous times also. So Sigh No More, he says, live unbruised, we are friends. In the cave, he wants to know how to live his life as it's meant to be. Winter Winds, we have the flesh that lived and loved. And then White Blank Page, lead me to the truth and I will follow you with my whole life. And Tim Shell talked about the baby child, the one to whom you gave life. And later on in Awake My Soul, right, in the very next line, he's going to talk about how where you invest your love, you invest your life. There's life again. And then after the storm, you must know life to see decay. And then later, we remembered our own land, what we live for. So the body is very closely tied in with death and with life. Because, pretty straightforward, right? In these bodies we will live, and in these bodies we will die. So while we're here on this earth, we have these bodies. We can't separate ourselves from them. They are part of us. And we'll have them until we die. So what does that mean? What's the significance of that? Well, he answers that in the next line when he says, where you invest your love, you invest your life. So because life is closely tied in with the flesh and with the body, therefore we use our bodies to invest our love, to invest our life. Our bodies are what we use to carry out the decisions that we make in life, to enact our choices, to love other people physically in the sense of marriage and the conjugal act, but then also just with giving of ourselves to other people by serving them, by spending time with them, by talking with them. Everything we do in this life is done through the body. Even the, when we pray, we take on a bodily prayer posture because that helps us to focus our woozy eyes, because the fickle flesh keeps our heart and soul in its place, right? So we cannot let it go to waste. Where you invest your love, you invest your life. Where you decide to spend your time, that's how you spend your life. To me, that really brought to mind the line from Matthew chapter 6, where he says, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Where you spend all of your time and attention, that's what's most important to you. That's investing your love and your life. Christ says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." So, very similar to what Mumford says in Thistle and Weeds, plant your hope with good seeds. I begged you to hear me, there's more than flesh and bone. And in Tim Shell, they say it will steal your innocence, but it will not steal your substance, which that in itself is reminiscent of Matthew chapter 10, where Christ says, "And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." In one sense, what happens to the body doesn't matter in the long run, because it's where your soul resides that is the most important, right? Which is why your soul you must keep totally free, and why the devil has neither reason nor rhyme with which to take this soul that is so rightfully mine. And yet at the same time, our fickle flesh keeps our heart and soul in its place. And so, yes, our souls are the most important part. That our soul is what is either angelic or demonic, right? That is either holy or sinful. But our bodies are what we use to form our souls, to make ourselves one way or another. Yes, we don't need to be afraid of those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, right? Because death can steal our innocence, but it cannot steal our substance. But if we don't keep our soul totally free of sin, our soul can be destroyed in hell. And where our soul goes after death, that's where our body is going to go also. So if our soul goes to hell, our body does too. If our soul goes to heaven, our body will follow us there at the resurrection. Yeah, I think these lines are super profound, right? In these bodies we will live, in these bodies we will die. And where you invest your love, you invest your life. There's so much profundity to those lines. You know, this idea of the body and the flesh being tied in with death and life, and how we use that to invest our love, to determine where we're going to go. I don't know where these guys get these ideas, but they get such great ideas, and I love it.
And so succinctly stated. You're saying.
2 lines, like 20 words.
Yeah. Yeah, because like I was saying, you know, very simply stated, but just so much to unpack with it all. It's very dense.
Kind of like us.
Yeah. And how we don't know anything.
We always stumble on those things we don't know.
You know, in these bodies we will die, but he's still imploring, you know, or asking, "Wake my soul." And how that transcends everything else. An awakened soul. I don't want to say awoke soul.
Awoke soul.
Awakened
An
soul.
awakened soul. Yeah. I think that's more grammatically accurate anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is, you know, as we know, one of the 4 cardinal virtues is to be grammatically accurate.
Right.
It's not quite at the level of the theological virtues, but it's pretty high up.
Yes.
Pretty high up there. That will determine, speaking of, you know, whether you'll go to heaven or to hell, that's a big one. Grammatical correctness, grammatical accuracy, that's huge. When you stand before the judgment seat of God, and he says, you know, I was hungry and you gave me no food, thirsty and you gave me no drink. I forgot an Oxford comma and you did not add one in for me.
Yeah.
Depart from me, you evildoers.
Someone was telling me that the Oxford comma is outdated, and I was very disturbed by that.
My brother Dennis got a comment on one of his YouTube videos recently. The username was the Oxford comma.
Oh!
He was so excited. He couldn't
Because
believe
of that other video where he talked about the Oxford comma.
Mm-hmm. He was so excited that the Oxford comma itself graced his comment section with its presence and complimented his video. He was very excited.
Shout out to Dennis Russell on
Yes,
YouTube.
go check him out. He's got a comedy channel called Dennis Russell, and
Dennis from Scratch?
Dennis from Scratch is his his health and cooking videos.
He's got good stuff on there.
Pretty good stuff, yeah. Lots of interesting
I no longer,
things.
I now only buy pasture-raised eggs because of his video on eggs.
That's great. I still buy the super cheap eggs.
Yeah, it's all right.
One of these days, I hope to, hey, support our support the Flight House, and maybe one day I'll be able to afford to buy fancy eggs.
Yeah. Yeah, so much so that you can maybe buy your own chickens.
That would be great. We'd love to have chickens. Send us some chickens.
Yeah.
If you're watching this video and you have chickens, don't send them to me. I have nowhere to put them right now. But one day when I have a yard and things, send me chickens. Anyway, maybe we should talk about Mumford and Sons again. We only have 2 lines left. We're super close to the end. So thank you for bearing with us for all this time, if you're still watching or listening. So lines 12 and 13. Awake, my soul, for you were made to meet your maker.
Wow.
Great lines. So first of all, I want to point out the obviousness of this expression, right? You were made to meet your maker. If you were made, then obviously you have a maker, right? It just really follows commonsensically from that. But the profundity here is that you were made to meet your maker, not just that you were made by a maker. He's not a deistic God who just built the universe like a clock and then leaves it running. He's actively involved in these things, and we are supposed to encounter him. But how can we do that? Only if our soul is awake, not woke, but awakened. And then also this expression, meeting your maker, in common parlance, it means dying, right? You have the villains who tell James Bond or whoever to prepare to meet your maker. So, yes, here they are talking about death again, but not just talking about death, also talking about awakening. Very mysterious connection between death and the next life, right? In that, in some strange way, death is just a precursor to another form of life. The church often refers to the sleep that prefigures death. I think that's in the office of Compline, or night prayer. When we go to sleep, it's symbolic of the fact that we will die one day. But after we die, that's actually when we really awake. When we wake up in the morning, that's actually an analogy for what happens to us after we die, which is that we awake into true life, the final end. And that's when we're really going to see the beauty of love as it was made to be. But that vision is not reserved simply for after we die. There are places where heaven and earth meet each other, and where in this world we can experience the meeting with the Maker, right? That great awakening. We can experience glimpses of it. As St. Paul says, we see dimly as through a mirror, right? But we can experience it somewhat in this life. And that's really what I think mostly what this song is about. It's about becoming spiritually awake, spiritually conscious in this life to encounter God in the world that he has created and the people that he's created, and in the way that he's fashioned our hearts to seek after the things that are good, the things that are true and beautiful. If we keep our soul totally free from sin, free from bad influences, if we invest our love and our life in good things with our bodies, then we will encounter God in the world. Our soul is so important to that process, to that we can't meet our Maker without our soul. Because God is a spirit, we need our soul in order to encounter him. Of course, through the incarnation, God has also become man. But if we don't have a soul, when we encounter Christ physically, we're just encountering another man, right? We can't really encounter his divine nature without our soul. In the same way, we can't encounter the spark of divinity that lives in every human person without our soul, because that spark of divinity resides in the human soul, in our own soul. And so like can only encounter like. So before we wrap up, just want to go through and recap where they talk about God at other points in this album. So Sigh No More, very first line of the album, serve God, love me, and mend. So they're already talking about the Maker there at the very beginning. Winter Winds, he talks about the God that I once loved, even though he fell away from him. White Blank Page, can you kneel before the King and say I'm clean? The King is God there. Awake My Soul, which is that's this song. Hey, talk about meet your Maker. Dust Bowl Dance, you'll pray to the God that you always denied. And then After the Storm, I guess I'll just go home, or God knows where. Those are all of the overt references to God. There are numerous other times where God is implied, like in Thistle and Weeds, it references to a lot of the sayings of Christ, and also talked about, how your faith is in shreds, right? So you've lost your faith in God, that sort of thing. But those ones that just went through are the explicit references to God or the Maker.
Well, it just makes me think of the cosmological argument.
Which is what again?
The evidence for God, one of the ontological arguments for God from Aquinas, Aristotle, but then adapted by Aquinas. We see evidence of creation, therefore there must be a creator.
The beauty of love is it was made to be. If love was made to be something, it was made to be something by some maker.
Right. Yeah. We
have reached the final portion of the podcast, so it's time to talk about what we've learned today. So I feel like we have really learned a lot today. This song has been super enlightening. We've covered a lot of ground. We've really looked back a lot on the rest of the album. If you haven't been following, I feel like if you just started with this episode, you were probably pretty lost. And so I apologize for that. But hopefully it's given you some incentive to go back and listen to or watch the previous episodes as we unpack those. But I feel like I'm really starting to get a good grasp of what this whole album is about, even more so than I did when we started out. And that's been really great. So I think what I'm not going to do is go through song by song and recap what we learned from those songs, because we've already done so much recap. But basically, I think in a nutshell, what we've learned today from this song is that our soul was made to meet its Maker, and that we live in our bodies, but without our souls, we might as well not exist, right? We're really nothing without our souls. If our soul is asleep, what's the point? And so, and also that hierarchy of the person, right? You have the flesh, above that you have the heart, and then finally you have the soul. And I think it's interesting that the heart is in the middle there, because the heart partakes in both the flesh and the soul, right? Because I said earlier that the heart, traditionally understood, is where body, mind, and soul all meet each other. And so having the heart between it, like it shares in the fickleness of the flesh, but also in that higher nature of the soul. So maybe that's the key to the whole image of the heart as it comes up in Mumford and Sons. Of course, we'll never fully understand it. It's
right.
There were at the end of the day, we'll still be stumbling over things we don't know.
Yes.
These things. This is poetry created by men, and men are universes unto themselves, and so that means when man subcreates, there's just so much depth to plumb in those in man's creations, in poetry especially. So it's been fun. 2 songs left on this album: Dust Bowl Dance and After the Storm. Both really good ones. Excited to get to them. Neither of them as good as this song, obviously, since this is maybe, well, I say that a lot, but this may be the best Mumford and Sons song
Ever.
It's possible. I don't know. I don't know if I can ever decide like what's their best one ever, because there's so many different factors that go into it, and so many just great songs. So
maybe the best one on this album.
I would, yeah, probably. I don't know that there's another one on this album that would be better. It's so good. I love it. So if it's been a while since you've listened to the song, or you haven't listened to it ever before, drop everything, go listen to the song. It's so wonderful. And thanks for tuning in. If you liked this, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, subscribe on your favorite podcast channels, share with a friend. If you have anybody else who would love to listen to a Mumford and Sons podcast that's over an hour and a half in length, then send this over to them. And stay tuned for more Mumford and Sons videos coming forth from us soon. And
I hope you have a very blessed remainder of Lent.
Yes.
You might be listening to this after Lent, but
in which case, have a wonderful Easter season. And I guess, the Flight House. I plugged it earlier, but I'll plug it again here. This is a production of The Flight House. Go and check us out at buymeacoffee.com/The Flight House. You can see what myself and our other creators are up to there. And if you want, you can support our work. And so I guess that's it. Until next time, we are T.S. Russell and
Bridget Gamboni,
reminding you to sigh no more.